In a previous video, I talked about Nintendo's long journey to bring 3D technology to gaming, which was fraught with failure after failure before they finally landed on success with the 3DS. But that isn't the only technology that they spent countless years and money on. The other one was online gaming. And much like 3D, that story also goes back all the way to the 1980s with this little guy here, the Famicom Network System. These days, we take net play and online gaming for granted. Even cheap handheld emulators have robust online capabilities. But long before the Switch or even the Wii and DS, Nintendo was trying to blaze the trail for online gaming as far back as 1988. That's right, Nintendo was doing the internet before the internet was doing the internet. This is the Famicom Network System. And it's comprised of two basic components. This modem, which plugs into the cartridge slot of the Famicom, and has a modular jack on the back which plugs into the phone line. And then there's this controller, which plugs into the expansion port on the front of the system. The modem has a slot here for cards which look similar to the Hue cards that you'd see on a TurboGrafx-16 or the Sega Master System. These cards basically acted like a modern-day SIM does, giving the user credentials to access a server where you could send and receive information. Very, very small bits of information. You see, Nintendo might have been ready to go online in the 1980s, but the internet infrastructure at the time was not. Data over plain old copper telecom lines in the 1980s was prohibitively expensive, and bandwidth was incredibly limited. Not to mention that most households had only one phone line, which meant that while this thing was in use, you couldn't make or receive any phone calls. But more than anything, there wasn't really anything to do with it yet. There were no websites or chat rooms or message boards for this thing to access, which leaves one important question of just what you could do with this thing. The answer to that is not that much. One bit of software for this was Nomura's Famicom Trading, which was made by the securities company called Nomura Holdings. With this chip, you could use the Famicom to do live stock trades. There was also Super Mario Club, which was more of a retail-facing application for stores to connect a Famicom kiosk where users could look up game reviews before they bought a game. By far the most popular software was JRA-PAT, which stands for Japan Racing Association Personal Access Terminal. Like the name suggests, this was an online betting service for horse racing. Betting on horses is still a really popular activity in Japan, and gaming companies have tried various ways over the years to integrate video game technology and live horse betting. These services don't sound like games, and in fact, gambling and stock trading are things that are actually illegal for kids to do. And that was exactly the point. Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamuchi wanted to pivot Nintendo away from being a toy company, which was seen as something just for kids, to the limitless frontier of telecommunications. He foresaw the future of online shopping, news and weather tickers, stock trading, and online media, and wanted to position Nintendo as the gateway to these worlds. At the time, Famicoms were in over 1/3 of all Japanese households, and he envisioned them coming to replace the telephone as the main hub to the outside world. In his own words, Yamauchi wanted the system to link Nintendo households to create a communications network that provides users with new forms of recreation and a new means of accessing information. Nintendo was far from the first to experiment with net connectivity. There was GameLine for Atari 2600 and Play Cable for the Intellivision as far back as 1980.
Every month on Play Cable, you'll play an action-packed selection of 15 Intellivision games, the games that play more like the real thing.
Services that allowed users to download games, but also attempted to incorporate things like net banking and email. However visionary these companies might have been in predicting the information age, making it a reality was more than one company could possibly do. It would require a vast infrastructure of constantly connected, high-speed communication lines. A project at a scale that could only be done by governments and huge telecom operators. In the end, the network system only sold about 130,000 units. But undaunted by this, Nintendo President Yamauchi said, "It's just a matter of time. When the people are ready for it, we have the network in place." For Nintendo, the failure of the network system was a learning opportunity. The biggest complaint among users had been that it would tie up their telephone lines, and data calls simply cost too much money. These lessons led directly to the development of the Satellaview, a Super Nintendo add-on which used broadcast satellite connections to achieve the same goals without tying up phone lines. Nintendo continued to experiment with different technologies, including the 64DD and the GameCube broadband adapter. It wasn't until the release of the Wii and DS that Nintendo's dream of complete online gaming came to fruition. But by that time, home computers had taken on the role as the gateway to the internet. Still, technology like this fascinates me as it shows how far ahead Nintendo was thinking way back in 1988. And it illustrates why timing is critical for emerging technologies. Sometimes being too early is as bad as being too late. Obviously, without a network to connect to, this modem is little more than a decoration. But look how cool it makes the Famicom look. This thing looks like a tank out of the movie Tron. And it's not all a waste either. One of the biggest complaints that I have regarding the Famicom design is that the controllers are hardwired to the system and the cords are just too short. But this controller plugs into the expansion port and has a slightly longer cord, meaning that you don't have to sit so close to the TV when you play. Obviously, the extra buttons don't do anything, but this works perfectly as an extra controller. I only paid about 2,000 yen or $13 for this set, so if it looks cool and it gives me an extra controller out of the deal, I consider it money well spent.